Now, welcome to the 10th session of the National Populist panel organized by the European Center for Populism Studies, the ECPS. As I said earlier, my name is Nationalist. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Szeged, partnering with the ECPS currently. Um, the ECPS curates panel series every few weeks, which is aimed at dissecting the diverse manifestations of the world. This series happened towards the end of the Mapping European Populism series, which embarked on looking at populism within Europe. And we decided to expand the series to capture populism globally, beyond the confines of Europe, where populism is normally studied. After titling this series, Mapping Global Understanding of Populism Worldwide, featuring monthly sessions as you're part of one now. Today marks our 10th session. That's Can you all still see me and hear me? Yeah, my internet connection dropped for I just got an alert. Sorry about that. This is our 10th session. And we will be looking at the various facets of populist, authoritarian, and nationalist trends in Japan and Taiwan. As normal and as a testament to our important commitment to building and disseminating knowledge, we are going to write a panel report, which will be up on our website. We'll also have this recording on our website and our YouTube channel. Please, when you have time, make sure to go subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have past panel series there, and other ECPS events linked to the linked to populism. These panel reports and videos are of invaluable resources, valuable sources of information for scholars, policymakers, and the wider audience who are interested in learning more about the contemporary challenges populism poses to global democratic efforts. Again, we want to extend our gratitude to all the scholars and presenters and the audience for being here, as well as those who are going to contribute their insights and expertise. Thank you very much. Without further ado, we shall begin the introduction of our moderator and our panelists. Today's panel will be moderated by Dr. Dachi Liao, who is an emeritus professor at the Institute at the National Sun Yat-sen University in Taiwan, and is a leading authority in the field of comparative politics, specializing in comparative legislators, politics, and information. With an illustrious career, she has served as director of the Department of Political Science at the National Sun Yat-sen University for multiple terms. Her global academic influence extends to prestigious institutions such as the Hoover Institution, Stanford University, and the Department of Politics at the University of Michigan, where she has held positions as a visiting professor. In addition to academic leadership, Professor Liao has played a significant role in shaping Taiwan's political science landscape. She has also served as president of the Taiwan Political Science Association and contributed to the development of political education as the director of Continuing Education Center at the Sun Yat-sen University. This allows comprehensive expertise, which spans research, education, evaluation, reflects a commitment to advancing political science and shaping the next generation of scholars. Dr. Yoshida Toro will be our first speaker, and his presentation is titled The State of Populism in Japan, A Comparative Perspective. Dr. Toro is a full professor of comparative politics at Toshisha University in Japan, with numerous publications analyzing populism in Japan. He specializes in political science, French politics, and comparative politics, and has been a visiting professor at the Saint Paul in Paris, and is now associate researcher at the Foundation for France, Japan, in France. He has numerous publications on populism in Japan. Our second speaker is Dr. Airo Hino, who has pushed through a minor cold, so thank you again for making the effort to join us. And he will be speaking about the nature of populism in Japan, Japan as an uncharted territory of global populism. Dr. Hino is a professor of political science at the School of Political Science and Economics, Waseda University in Tokyo. His research of party systems and electoral systems, voting behavior has been published in various academic journals. He is the author of New Challenge of Parties in Western Europe, a comparative analysis, and the co-author of How Populist Attitudes Scales Fail to Capture Support for Populists in Power, He's currently running two JSPS-funded projects on populist attitudinal skills and the database of populist discourses in Japan. Our third speaker is Dr. Juinqi Lin, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Marketing Communication National San Yat-sen University. Dr. Lin has recently received a doctoral double degree diplomas, one from the National San Yat-sen University in Taiwan, and the second from the Catholic University of Louisville, which is in the United Kingdom. His research mainly touches upon populist communication, internet politics, populism, and comparative politics, European politics, and digital methods. His PhD thesis has led to several awards, including being named the best doctoral dissertation by the Taiwan Political Science Association in 2022, as well as the prize for excellent doctoral dissertation. Dr. Juanqi Lin is also a member of our Early Career Researchers Network and will deliver his presentation titled How Professionalized Are Parties, which looks at unpacking populist communication strategies on Facebook using the upcoming 2024 presidential election as a case study. And our final speaker will be delivered by Dr. Su Yan Shu, who is an assistant professor at political science department at McMaster University in Canada. She holds a PhD degree in geography from the University of British Columbia. And her title is looking at populism in Taiwan, rethinking the neoliberalism populism nexus. So as you can see from the amazing bios, we have stellar presentations today. As a reminder, towards the end of the session, we have a short Q&A session, depending on time. So please, if you have questions, write them down on a piece of paper next to you or put them in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. You can also just raise your hand by using the virtual hand button that's on here. I will now transfer authority to Professor Dachi Liao, who will present the overview of populism in Taiwan and Japan, and will continue with the administration of the panel. Professor Liao, take it away. Professor Liao, I think you're still muted. We can't hear you. Your mic is not turned on. So towards the, I'm not sure if it's muted on your PC, towards the bottom of the
Okay, yeah, I got it. Thank you for your introduction. Neil, right? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate ECPS inviting me to attend this panel. Actually, in the beginning, I feel I shouldn't chair this panel. I think I only have a quite limited knowledge about, especially about populism area other than Taiwan. But the conference organizer, Bulent convinced me. I think we are academic. Learning is our lifelong duty. We are forever students. So I really appreciate it. And right now, you give me this chance to learn and to understand, to try to look around the global so-called populism in the world. I also prepare a PowerPoint. Let me share my PPT first. Let me try to do it. Okay. Okay. Can you see the PPT? Hello? Okay, thank you. Yeah, as you can see, the organizer assigned me to do an overall assessment on various facets of populism, authoritarian, and nationalist trend in Japan, Taiwan. In the beginning, I remember they asked me to even including Hong Kong. To me, I really feel, Hong Kong, Japan, I don't think they do have so-called populist trend to me, by previous definition for populism. But after I learned, I studied literature related, I feel quite interesting. So eventually, the organizer focused on Japan, Taiwan only. I think it's a good way to do this. That's a kind of a general topic. Then the next one, first I check with the literature several important so-called populist figures appear in literature, both on Taiwan and Japan. In Japan, we can see the kind of previous prime minister, Kuzumi Junichiro. Am I right? Okay, forgive me. And also Abe Shinzo. There's a Japanese side. For our Taiwanese side, it's Han Kuo-yu and Ke Wen-je. And also, I noticed there's several local governors from on Japan side, but I think we just skip the local level. Otherwise, we can talk a lot. For these two, we can immediately tell the difference between the two countries. Japan, these two are prime minister from the ruling party. They are labeled as a so-called populist figures. But in Taiwan, these two only from the opposition parties. And they are not ruling yet, even though Han Kuo-yu now is a speaker of our legislative yuan. So we have story behind that. So, and also, I look back to all the kind of previous workshop held by ECPS, and I see the kind of centers make so much effort to study so-called populist trend in all kinds of countries, especially in Asia. But they send me the kind of a link. I've seen a lot of Asia countries, especially Indochina, including Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Singapore, including all kinds of different type of regimes. So I try to figure out the underlying assumption for mapping the global populism. Even though we can have a lot of variety of populism, I think this name mentioned by Tora Yoshida, but we need to have some similar foundation or kind of a definition for populism. Then we are talking about the same thing. That's my concept. My own kind of a interpretation of the underlying assumption for the global, mapping the global populism is a permanent division existing between the elite and the people in any polity. It's not only so-called the democratic polity, but also including authoritarian. Any polity in the world is supposed to have a permanent division between elite and the people. There's a basic fundamental division, so-called, I think, the assumption underlying the populism. Then the second one, we try to identify the so-called populist phenomena. We are talking about the same thing. We need to identify some similar characteristics. Some similar can cover so wide area, mapping all the kind of authoritarian, so-called populist trend all over the world. So I think the kind of a certain characteristics here, I list here is first a certain social cleavage has been provoked. This kind of social cleavage, for example, economic. Yeah, we're talking about neoliberalism. Racial is kind of the easiest one to provoke that kind of confrontation of populist, racial or ethnic. Then political, yeah, the established and anti-establishment. And religious, you all know the kind of religious confrontation, Islamic and Christianity, there's some kind of a cleavage, easy to be provoked. That's the first criterion. I think it is we try to identify populist phenomena. Second is charismatic leader or political party, certain political party, play a crucial role to stir people's anxious mood toward that cleavage. You have to find some kind of social worrisome, then you try to stir that. That's usually through charismatic leaders or political parties. Party can do together. It's a kind of maybe loosely coupled between leaders and the parties. Parties may own certain skills. The third one, I think that's talking about a lot, and a lot of people use that to directly cover everything, even call the communication populism. That kind of definition emphasizes mainly on communication style, including very emotional vocabulary, the rhetoric they use, and quite colloquial, all kind of I found that a lot of literature, especially belong to the category so-called communication, they like to focus on this kind of definition, communication style. And my student, Junqi, now is a PhD, he also attend our conference here. More often than not, use this kind of communication style as a kind of major phenomena of the so-called populist trend. Okay, that's the three items I list as a kind of populist phenomena. Then I also try to mapping possible factors causing a populist trend. The first one, as you see, economic. Yeah, a lot of things come from a getting wider a gap between the rich and the poor. There's a traditional, we call them Marxism. Yeah, feeling of a relative deprivation emergence. I think this kind of feeling is more important than kind of a kind of purely objective numbers telling the gap between the rich and poor. The relative deprivation really, if emerged, easy to be provoked, that kind of feeling. And also, I think that kind of generation difference also come from this kind of relative deprivation feelings. The second one, I think, is political factors. The issue, I give an example, is the issue of national identity comes into being. Like in Taiwan, we always have a national identity issue. On the one hand is ROC identity, Republic of China. On the other hand is Taiwanese nationalism. It's still confrontational, even right now. Then the third one is culture. We call religious fundamentalist. That's you heard a lot about that, and also religious fundamentalist resisting certain ideational trend like gender equality or gay marriage. Some religious fundamentalists just hate about that. And also, I give another example. I call the deep belief in meritocracy. I don't know whether you read this book or not. That's from Harvard University professor Sandel. Justice is his justice is very famous. His book, I think, is very interesting. He's trying to discuss why Donald Trump can win. Maybe he will win again this year, Donald Trump. He wrote the book, The Tyranny of Merit. He tried to explain American belief in if they make effort, they can get what they want. What they promise is open ground. You can fight what you can get. But eventually, there's a division between elites and the mass. And also, the kind of a ruling echelon always belong to certain elites, like people come from Harvard, Yale, whatever, that kind of a problem, Sandel. So a deep belief in meritocracy. The first one is institutional. I believe the kind of Yoshida Toro also mentioned about cultural institutional factors in your articles. I believe from read articles, literature, my interpretation, I give an example, full implementation of liberal democracy design, democratic design, actually give rise to the populism. Also, like Lau, I think you all know him. He mentioned this in his book, like the populism, what's in the name, in populism and the mirror of democracy. Actually, he tried to say populism is inherent part of democratic politics. So if you implement democracy more solely, more fundamental, liberal democracy, then people will frustrated, get very much, because they just cannot reach the goals of being equal. Everyone shares the same political rights. It's totally difficult in a democratic society. Then the last one, I think, is not so crucial, but for different time, different age, we find different technological advancement. Right now, we find the prevalence of social media so important for the kind of the rise of populism. That's 5 factors I try to mapping for understanding. Then also I also give a kind of my own view about the possible effect of populist trend on the polity. I think both negative and positive side, and from literature the same. Positive side, if you have a populist trend, you can get policy change. Your policy may focus certain group and make some other group very frustrated. Like in Taiwan, young generation feel they are frustrated because the policy may only benefit some well-established. The young generation feel they got nothing. Then power restructured. the new power can emerge under this populist trend. That's, I think, is a good sign for democracy. The backside, a negative side, is social polarization, like in the United States, that kind of situation. I think quite serious, yeah. And the regime breakdown, that's a worst case. That's a kind of effect. Then I also try to do a really very preliminary comparison between Japan and Taiwan's so-called populist trend, these two different countries. Very preliminary. I really ask your forgiveness. I'm not expert in Japan's politics. I know Taiwan a lot better. I try to use some theoretical framework to make a rough comparison. I really ask for your criticism, even totally throw down or totally can't say you got something wrong. I'm looking for what your debates are totally overthrow what I said here. As I said, there's four figures: Japan, Kuzumi and Abe, and Taiwan, Han and Ke. That's identified. But the kind of in the very kind of a rough image, the two prime minister from the ruling party, the other two from the opposition. I think from the opposition party, to me, is more populist trend, but Japan is so difficult to identify. Like the Professor Hino is uncharted territory of global in Japan. Difficult to find to me too in Japan. The second one is the factors. What kind of factors cause the so-called populist phenomenon? I think economic aspect for Japan is more. For Taiwan is less. I have no time to explain the detail and only my rough impression. Taiwan actually the kind of policy orientation, especially economic policy orientation, quite similar to each other, are very rightist in general, I can say. Then the political domain, I think in Japan, for these two prime ministers, they only kind of claim a little nationalism. They both of them went to the Yasukuni Jinta, right? They try to remind the Japanese previous nationalism during the kind of World War II, and but I think it's not their key point. Economic policy change maybe is their key point. I don't know whether I'm right or wrong. I'm waiting for the two Japanese professors criticize that. But for Taiwan, my reading is more nationalism for Han Kuo-yu. He mentioned about RC identity, Republic of China's identity. And if he comes out, oh, it's national flag, RC national flag is everywhere. It's more nationalism for Han Kuo-yu. But for Ko-wen-je, it's not so strong. He's trying to stand in between DPP and KMT. Then for culture side, I will say that's my only very brief, very rough observation. Our both Japanese and Taiwanese culture discourage populism, I think, because we don't have that kind of a meritocracy culture. We are not really that pursuing, consider your own merit make you deserve everything. But we, to a certain extent, we believe in fate. We think the fate lead me here. Maybe I don't deserve a highest position, even I make effort. I can get some return, but I'm not so frustrated if I didn't get the kind of whatever other people have. I think we have the kind of fate, believe in fate more than merit. That's what my rough understanding. Please correct me if you don't agree. Then the kind of institutional one, I think, please correct me, in Japan, more authoritarian design. You have a LDP almost forever, and LDP know a lot of details to control, including social media. A lot, very detailed. Certainly, what I understand or I utilize the definition for institutionalism is more close to so-called neo-institutional one. It's not a kind of a traditional institution, not only legal framework, including a lot of tradition, custom, whatever. But Taiwan, so far, I see in comparison with Japan, we are more liberal democratic design. We have party competition. We have a lot of detail, especially for media control, social media. We have no governance at all for social media. But for the prevalence of social media is the same. But the rule governing social media in Japan, as far as I know, more stricter than Taiwan. That's what my impression. In fact, I like to say for both countries, for both Japan. Yeah, okay. My time is up. Policy change for Japan. Yeah, economic policy. In Taiwan, it's power restructure. We got a new party, so I think it's pretty good. Okay, see, come to the end. Thank you. I really say I'm throughout a piece of a break. Welcome our Jade coming out from our 4 speakers. Thank you for your listening. Thank you. Okay, sure, I stop. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you continue introducing the speakers as you're the panelists for the
Okay, session. Okay. Still my turn as a chair. Okay. I think next one, we like to have a Professor Yoshida Toro. Yeah. Also, I know he's more theoretical and he consider about the variety of populism. I really like to hear from you, especially your criticism about my impression of Japan and Taiwan's populism. Thank you. Please, Professor Yoshida.
Thank you, Daichi Liao. So, hello there, I'm Toru Yoshida from Dosha University and Japan, based in Kyoto. And thank you again for this kind invitation. And I'm really pleased today that I can exchange with our most distinguished experts on populism. Let me now share my slide, my PowerPoint. Can you see that? Is that okay? Yeah. The PowerPoint. Okay. So, as a second speaker, I would like to talk on this specific case of populism in Japan, and entitled here as a state of populism in Japan. And to be quick, it seems that the Japanese populism is quite different from those that we are witnessing in other countries, especially that with those in advanced democracies, especially when one compares it to the European one. And in terms of comparison, I put it in a very brief manner, but the features of actual Western populism is that on the right wing, they are politically nationalist or nativist, and economically they are protectionist or anti-globalist, and socially we could say that they are conservative or authoritarian, right? And we also now are familiar that exist a left, what we call the left populist too. And in that case, they are politically cosmopolitan, economically protectionist, and socially inclusive. And I know that this is maybe even too much simplified, but I believe that this summary has become more or less a consensus among the populism studies. And on the other hand, when we look at the Japanese populists, at least when we look closely on the political movement or politicians who are considered as a populist, we notice that they have a different nature compared to the Western one. And maybe my Japanese colleague will present later more something precise, but I have put here some names known as populists in my country, and also their main policies adopted. And I would like to add that they are not listed ad hoc, but they are selected on 3 criteria. That's first, the discourse is centered on the good people versus the corrupt elites, and alternatively praise for what they call the people, and prefer to engage in direct communication with their electorate. And again, I think that everyone agrees more or less that these names are interpreted as populist in Japan. And So when one compares them with a general definition of Western populism that we have seen earlier, we notice that they are quite substantive. There are substantive difference between those in Western politics and those in Japan. It is that first, except for Koizumi that Daiichi have mentioned before, and who was prime minister in the first half of the year 2000, all the rest, as you can see here, all the rest populist regional politicians, local political figures as their governors or city mayors who are elected by universal suffrage. And two, when we measure their positions, they are all politically reformist, lead here as they tend to claim institutional change, and economically they are neoliberal. Neoliberal type of politicians means here that they are taking a pro-market stance. And if we could put these two differences as a research questions, my hypothesis goes like this. First, the fact that regional politicians are elected electorally, and the regional electoral system in Japan for the Congress is a multiple seat system, which are very much proportional, by the way. It means that the congressman sitting for the seat can win that with at least 15 to 20% of the votes. Since a rational strategy for a governor or a mayor candidate is to try to attract votes from the independent voters much as possible, and who are mainly residents of the metropolitan area. To put it simply, the head of local government is to play a kind of guardian of the ordinary people against the partisans of the vested and corrupt elite in the Congress. So in that case, it seems that we can answer to the question for the first question by institutional reasons and strategic rationality of these populist politicians. And remind that in a seminal work on populist studies published by Margaret Canavan in 1981, she made a typology of those populists for the US governors, where she defines as reactionary populism. And as far as the second question concerns about their political and economic policy positions, my claim goes in the same way. It is that much of the independent voters in Japan support neoliberal reforms. And when, for example, in a survey conducted in 2005, this is when, by the way, the Prime Minister Koizumi had a landslide victory in the general election. The voters who distrust politicians and public servants and who support neoliberalism, they massively voted for the LDP, for the governmental party. And these Japanese voters has low level of confidence in politics and therefore tends to approve neoliberal policies. And we know that those populist voters in the US, also in Europe, have distrust in politicians and to their institutions, which is also the case in Japan. But the difference is that these attitudes are connected to neoliberalism and reformist-oriented policies. And I think this is one crucial point when one tries to understand populism in Japan, because if we define populism as a politics of anti-elite, it shows that the Japanese established elite have not the same political stance as those in Western countries. If I may say it in a somewhat controversial way, if the established Japanese political leaders share a lot with that of Western populists, meaning that they are politically conservative and economically protectionist, then it is rather easy to understand why styles and forms of Japanese populists are neoliberal and reformist. And if those statements are fair, it means that we have to go to a deeper analysis of Japanese electoral markets. And what is striking here in the figure shown is that today the majority of voters in Japan are independent, means that they don't have any party affiliation. And here shown on your left, in purple lines is the voters affiliated to the governing parties, LDP, and in gray, what you see here in gray, these are so-called independent, non-partisan voters. And these voters grew up in numbers from the de-alignment occurred in the 1990s, but it remained in a very high level, as you can see here. And it depends on the election, but we can, let's see, briefly estimate that they are about 30% at minimum and up to 50 to 60% sometimes. And in a wider perspective, politicians and political parties trying to attract these independent voters are generally denoted as populist, which is especially the case for Koizumi and other regional political figures. And to just cite an example, the figures on your right show that in the last general election 2 years ago in 2022, those non-affiliated voters voted the most for the LDP with 21% here, but next come the Ishin no Kai with 80%, a party recognized as populist. And also, this is one wide electoral survey conducted during the Tokyo Metropolitan Congress election held in 2017. And it points out that voters who supported the party of the populist Koike, they have nothing in common with a so-called populist attitude. And this is a data collected from my Japanese colleagues, and they show very well here that based on the criteria of populist attitude, these populist voters do not share these values as for anti-elitism or as for xenophobia attitude. And what we see here in the chart is that, for example, the voters of the LDP have more xenophobic stance or gender biased views, and the communists have more in common with a populist attitude, as they tend to favor anti-elitism or seeking more sovereignty. And on the contrary, voters who voted for the party of the populist Koike, the Tokyo First Party, here mentioned as TFP, they have a more median or moderate position in every type of populist attitude. And this shows that maybe Koike, as the governor Koike herself, have employed a populist first strategy for the reason, by the way, I mentioned before, but the voters have not really reacted to that positions. And I think this chart demonstrates well how the so-called populist voters in Japan are not populist at all. And I don't have the intention to deny the title of today's panel, but in that sense, at least Japanese ordinary populist voters are not authoritarian nor nationalist. So let me now move slowly to the conclusion then. I have pointed mainly two specificities of Japanese populism compared to the other countries, is that one, they are mainly represented by the governors or mayors of the metropolitan area, metropolitan region, and I have explained the reason from an institutionalist framework. The second feature is that most of them, despite that they have, of course, certain disparities, they all adopt a neoliberal or expose reformist stance. And these 2 points can be explained by the tendencies occurred in Japanese electoral market, namely the constant growth of non-partisans voters or independent voters. And as a remark, it seems to me normal that those populists are seen as populists because I know it's kind of tautology, but because all of these populist politicians, except for Koizumi, they all have established their own political movement. And even for Koizumi, we have to remind that he was an outsider in his own party and have strongly opposed to the ancient regime. And as a matter of the fact, from the end of the 19th century, when the term populism appeared in politics, the term populism was always used as a battle term in a Weberian sense. These Moody and Cultivar, these two recognized scholars, put it here. And in some, the term populism is always used to denounce or attack a political entity that we don't understand or something new that doesn't fit to the existing political cleavage or existing political agenda. And remind that the term populism itself is not descriptive nor an analytic concept per se. And relating to this point, I find very illuminating the paper published on your website of the ECPS. It was signed by Aurélien Mondon, stating that the notion of populism itself is a kind of social construction, and he draws attention that we, as a scholar, we have first to determine ourselves on how we judge politics as a whole. So having said that, as far as my talk concerns today, I claim first that populism in Japan has quite a different nature and facet, especially when one compares it to the Western one, and where in Japan we are experiencing a depoliticization or depolarization of the voters, contrary to the Western voters, which is also make a difference with other democracies, and therefore those voters operates a significant pressure on the existing party competition, allowing allies to a populist politician. And finally, I hope that my analysis contributes wider to a deeper comparative understanding on populism in Asia, at least in Japan. I'm a little bit ahead of my time, but they are here as a reference, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for Professor Yoshida's presentation. And he tried to describe the current situation in Japan regarding so-called populism. Actually, from my readings, it's not really a populism in Japan. It's a kind of election populism, only occur during election time, and also under the kind of we call a single-member district. Only elect one governor, so easily to happen at the local level. For the national level, because parliamentary election is a kind of multi-party competition, even though LDP is the biggest one quite a long time. Thank you for your explanation. Very informative. Thank you. And also pose a lot of interesting questions for us to think about and maybe doing the further research. I also think, how can we say Japan has populism? I don't think that really happened at all. Maybe, but thank you for your explanation. Then we move to the next one. It's from Professor Errol Hino, right? Also talking about the nature of populism in Japan. Okay, please, Professor. Should I call you Errol or Hino? Professor Hino?
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Please.
Thank you. So, right, my slides shared fine, right? Okay, well, I'd like to thank you, the ECPS, for having me here and the kind invitation. I have to apologize that I'm still not 100% in shape, that I tried to refrain from speaking for the past 3 days, so I haven't, I hope that my voice lasts until the very end, but let me nonetheless start talking. So I'm gonna be talking about the nature of populism in Japan. And often the time Japan is described as a country without populism. Let me start by showing some of the examples how Japan and the populism in Japan is perceived, or the lack of the populism. Why is Japan populist free? That's one of the titles that have appeared in the past years. Japan's firewall against populism. So there's an underlying assumption that populism is not present in Japan. Is populism finally coming to Japan? Once again, there's an underlying assumption that populism is not present. So the aim of my talk is to give a reflection on the notion that Japan is immune to populism, and then to show that Japan has actually experienced populism, and then to finally suggest that such experiences have prevented the surge of full-fledged populism in Japan. So before starting and going in a bit further, let me just have a bit of a general introduction of how populism is analytically conceived. I'm just putting the 3 points that have been given by one of the prominent scholars, Hideo Otake, in 2003, one of which he gives as a sub-concept of, let's say, Japanese style of populism, is that it presents themselves as outsiders, ordinary people against elite. This is very much in line with what Kasmude conceives as populism and anti-elitist, anti-establishment as one of the components, and then reduce politics to a fight between morally good and bad, and between friends and enemies. Professor Yoshida explicitly describes this characteristic of populist politics as the politics of making enemies. So there's this divide between good and evil, and friends and enemies. And lastly, it exploits mass media through a theatrical style. So these B and C, the last 2 points, are very much in line with what Kasmude defines as Manichaeism, the worldview that dichotomizes there is good and evil, and in two elements. And this theatricality is quite unique to the Japanese discourse, and it can be also terms and coined as poetic justice or morally play in Japanese kanzen choaku. This is also something that is referred to by Professor Otake and also Yoshida as well. So there, the last element of people-centrism, that is one of the other elements in Kasmude's definition, is somewhat less highlighted, but the two of them, anti-elitism and Manichaeism, are very much in line with the definition that have been already given 20 years ago. I'm not going to repeat all these politicians, as has been already addressed, and also can be referred to once again. But at national level and also at the local level, there are, let's say, populist politicians that are considered to be populist. So I'm gonna talk about two main sort of perspectives of how populism in Japan can be conceived. One is populism as a real discourse. I'm going to show that populism is not only an analytical concept, but as an idea, and also a frame which has shaped politics in Japan since 1990s. I will then discuss how populism is understood by the media and the general public, and then highlight the gap between the discourse and the analytical concept. And secondly, I'm gonna talk about populism as an analytical concept, and I will then discuss how we can understand populism in Japan as an analytical concept in light of the so-called reform politics. So this is the trend that is collected from the newspaper's archive database and also journals and periodicals. Terms populism or populist start to emerge in the 1990s. Before it was non-existent. The first spike, that's when what we call the reform politics, era of reform politics started in 1990s. And the second spike comes in the early 2000s in the Koizumi era. And the third spike comes in the PJ government, Democratic Party of Japan, between 2009 and 2012. Then the last wave comes with the global populism, as we know. So first, let me talk about populism as a real discourse that is shared by the public. Let me coin this rather as a popularism. I'm going to explain why that is. In common usage, populism has often referred to ideas and policies which pander to the electorate, basically pleasing the people, focusing on satisfying and also gratifying constituents with short-term benefits. And there's a reason why populism is in a real discourse conceived as popularism. The reason why is the major newspapers have used Taishu Geigo, which literally means pandering to the masses, pleasing masses with short-term benefit, as a translation to populism. So populism as a Japanese term, it did exist since as a term that has existed from the history of the US and all that, but not as a general terminologies that would appear in the newspapers. But in 1990s, newspapers have started to use populism. Then within the bracket, the translation is Taishu Geigo, which is pandering to the masses. Yomiuri Shimbun, which is one of the central right newspapers, in particular presented the term populism with this Japanese translation. And these two terms, populism and Taishu Geigo, come together in about 56% of the articles in this Yomiuri Shimbun, and then that percentage goes down with the center-left newspapers like Mainichi, even to a lesser extent, Asahi Shimbun. Notably, Asahi Shimbun, which is center-left progressive newspaper, used this same translation of Taishu Geigo earlier in the 1990s, but started to use much less in the Koizumi era when Yomiuri Shimbun started to use it as a translation. So the general public learn what populism means by this. Basically, popularism, right? That pleasing people with the short-term physical pork barrel type of benefits. So has been generally understood as a political style that makes politicians popular, right, by means of handing out short-term benefits to people. And these terms have negative and pejorative connotations in Japan that politicians rarely wish to identify themselves as populists. For example, Junichi Koizumi, which was seen as the typical populist leaders by the newspapers by the time, considered to be a, he refused to be identified as populist in the interview with the German magazine Spiegel in 2002, that what he proposes in his neoliberal policies is different from populism, as he does not necessarily address policies that are popular among people. So he definitely does not agree to the description that is given to him. But at least that's how people understood as what populism means. Now, the second pillar of my talk is about populism understood as political reforms. As I said, populist was first introduced in 1990s, but rather with a more positive connotation than a negative connotation. For example, Tokyo gubernatorial election in 1995, Yukio Aoshima, TV celebrity and long-term upper house member, defeated veteran bureaucrat candidate endorsed by LDP. Then he was described as populist. And the newly created party, DPJ, which seized power in 2009 until 2012, when it was formed, then that party was called Populist by the ex-prime minister of the LDP. And also another ex-prime minister of the LDP called this party as Urban Tokyo Bourgeois in association with the urban citizens movements. So not necessarily positive connotations. There's a bit of a negative connotation here as well. But and also the new Japan New Party, which leader became Prime Minister Morihiro Hosokawa, was called the New Populist Party leader, and that's also something that is described by Professor Otake. And this populist turn has shaped the let me say zeitgeist, following the terminology used by Kasumude, the spirit of time in the 1990s and 2000. And this can be phrased as a reform politics. And during that time, the background was that there was this increasing criticism and attacks on central government bureaucrats. Government bureaucrats faced serious attack and scrutiny following high-profile scandals, health scandal over HIV-tainted blood, that ex-LDP Prime Minister Miyazawa described Naoto Kan, which became the Prime Minister in 2010, at the time the leader of the DPJ, as the general populist. And there was this financial scandals over mishandling of housing loan company. So there's this series of scandals involving central high-profile bureaucrats. And these scandals and wrongdoing arouse anti-elite sentiment. And there's this discussion about the criticism of elite bureaucrats led to populism among people and the media. And as central government bureaucrats are the elite of the elite, they are really the graduates of the top, let's say, law department of University of Tokyo, often as it's a bit of stereotype, but it really is the case, the elite of the elite. This negative publicity inevitably contributed to the rise of broadly anti-elite public sentiment. So once again, we've seen that the reform politics came first more with a positive connotation, but as the newspaper started to use populism as popularism, the Koizumi era, this term has been used even more. Then, as I'm going to show you, during the DPJ government, this is a third spike. Sorry, let me first talk about Koizumi era, then the DPJ government. And this really public sentiment of anti-elite sentiment coincided with the arrival of Koizumi Junichiro as Prime Minister in 2001, who stayed in power for 5 years and 5 months. His neoliberal policies, downsizing central government and reforming public administration, privatizing public bodies such as post office and the public corporation responsible for operating highways.
Professor Hino, please,
right.
A little bit quickly, yeah.
Right, I'm gonna wrap it up.
Yeah,
this his style, theatricality, is very much in line with the this concept of populism, and then DPJ government very much in line with Koizumi's sort of message about anti-bureaucrats reforms. It was basically really promising more control, more political control of the government. Basically, prioritizing national interests instead of ministries' interests. And then afterward, Shinzo Abe's and beyond, and even to the Suga government, some of the anti-academic and anti-big tech kind of sentiment has been. This is another dimension of, let's say, non-political elite sentiment, but still is anti-elitist sentiment can be found. So as a concluding kind of like takeaways message is that there's this penetration of reform politics, let me call it as a zeitgeist of 1990s and 2000 in Japan, has prevented the surge of full-fledged populism. Let me go back to this slide that since Japan has experienced several peaks of reform politics, Koizumi's populism or popularism, even if he doesn't agree to it, and DPJ's kind of continuation of reform politics, this has, given that there was such sort of accumulation and continuation of reform politics, some forms of populism that has prevented Japan did not ride this huge tide of global populism. Because of that, populism is not new to Japanese politics because it has already penetrated to the language and the daily politics, even among the mainstream politicians. That's the reason why we are not witnessing the surge of populism, but it does not mean that Japan has lacked populism in the past. So that will have me conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hino. Yeah, you try to say why is no strong populism in your country. Yeah, we can understand that. And also, even there are some ingredients still existing in your society that may nurture so-called populism in the future. But by my sense, it's not so easy for Japan to have a very strong or full-fledged populism in Japan. I don't think it's easier happen in the future. Okay, we should move to the third paper. According to my agenda, it's supposed to be Dr. Xu Ziyun, right? Hello, is Xu Ziyun? It's you? Hello, the third one. Hello, where is Xu? Professor Xu from Canada. Are you there? Yeah, it's your turn. Please keep 15 minutes because we are already over time a little bit. Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
try. Okay.
Thank you. 15 minutes, please. Right now is 05 almost, then 20 at most. Thank you.
So can you see my screen, share screen?
Yeah.
Cool. So thank you for inviting me to be part of the panel. It's my honor to be here with so many renowned scholars. So in today's presentation, I'll be majorly talking about my most recent article, Populism in Taiwan, Rethinking the Neoliberalism Populism Nexus. But I will also extend the analytical framework that I developed to account for the latest populist surge in Taiwan during the presidential election earlier this year. So let's start with what I mean by the neoliberalism populism nexus. So in the global populism literature, there has been a popular view that contemporary populism is a pathological outcome of neoliberal globalization, that there is high correlation between economic grievances among working class and their inclination of supporting populist leaders. And this type of populism usually displays anti-establishment, anti-elitism, and even like xenophobic traits. Meanwhile, Taiwan has also witnessed burgeoning populist politics in the past 2 decades. But how does Taiwan fit into this picture, like overall picture? And if Taiwan's experiences diverge from this causal reading, what does that tell us about the relationship between neoliberalism and populism? So But besides seeing neoliberalism as a reactionary response to, populism as a reactionary response to neoliberalism, we can also ask that, can it be possible that neoliberalism arises from populism? Or we can even further recalibrate the nexus by asking, is populism a consequence, a counterforce, or a constitutive component of neoliberalism? So if we look at East Asia, which is the focus of today's panel, the experiences are highly diverse. On the one hand, the region saw the rise of populist leaders who embraced neoliberal policies across South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. I think the previous two speakers already elaborated very well on Japan's case. And on the other hand, there has been like new waves of popular demonstrations in the region that are usually seen as a form of resistance to the deepening neoliberal order. For example, the candlelight movement in South Korea and the sunflower movement in Taiwan. So these examples demonstrate that the relationship between like neoliberalism and populism in East Asia is far from determined. So in order to develop a more systematic framework to analyze the relationship between these diverse experiences, I draw on the Gramscian hegemony theory, specifically the concept of the integral state and the non-reductionist class analysis in my research. So the Gramscian integral states consist of like basically two major rings. So the economic rings, in which the state has to ensure capitalist accumulation, and the political ring, in which state has to like secure leadership and legitimacy. And the state will only achieve hegemony through fulfilling both functions. And if a crisis occurred in one ring, evolves into a compound crisis in both rings, then it will eventually lead to destabilization of the state hegemony. So in order to like re-establish hegemony, the state has to introduce either like new modes of capitalist accumulation or a new capital mechanism of political legitimization. So this process would entail like the realignment of like existing social classes in the uneven political economic terrain. So in this case, the Gramscian-inspired non-reductionist class analysis helps identify new frontiers of social antagonism, which is also where populist politics often takes place. So let's apply this analytical framework to Taiwan by grappling with the formation of the integral state in Taiwan. So the integral state in Taiwan, established by the KMT regime in the post-war era, was run on a model usually called the developmental state, that also contributed to Taiwan's economic miracle. And this model embraces small and medium enterprises, SMEs, led exportism while exercising authoritarianism to achieve social and political control. But such a post-war hegemony was undergoing like a double crisis since the 1980s. Economically, we faced a capitalist accumulation crisis due to over-accumulation and the fall of SME-led exportism due to rise of labor costs. And politically, the state faced a fundamental legitimacy crisis after its loss of the Westphalian sovereignty and the UN seat to People's Republic of China. And the authoritarian rule was further challenged by the burgeoning civil society's request for political reform. So to address the dual crises, the KMT regime launched a comprehensive hegemonic restructuring project under the new leader, Li Denghui. In terms of the capitalist accumulation crisis, the state began to encourage overseas investment in sort of like lowering production costs. Some scholars call it a spatial fix. And in the political arena, the regime adopted like indigenization and top-down democratization to sustain its governing legitimacy. And also in the cultural arena, President Li Denghui also invoked a new Taiwanese identity as a response to its sovereign crisis. In addition, the regime launched a very comprehensive set of measures to regain hegemony, which includes like expanding collaboration with local factions via pork and barrel politics, rolling out like a nationwide community development project to enhance popular corporatism, and enhancing social welfare programs such as farmer subsidies and national health insurance. So the measures widely wielded by the indigenized KMT regime successfully achieved temporary hegemony, but it also seeded roots for the future crisis to come. So in the economic arena, the crisis of capitalist accumulation was largely dislocated and deferred rather than resolved. And in the political arena, it neutralizes potential political crisis through absorbing social antagonism into popular corporatism. But it, at the same time, led to rampant local level corruption, the rise of like mafia politics, and widespread public distrust of political institutions. So these unresolved social, economic, and political issues from the hegemonic restructuring process paved the way for the rise of populist politics and cultivated two bifurcated forms of populism in the following decades, which is what I call the liberal populism of the bourgeoisie and the neoliberal populism of the multitude. So the first form of populism arising from the legacies of the hegemonic restructuring is liberal populism of the bourgeoisie. So this form of populism emerged from the growing urban middle class, who ostensibly endorses liberal democratic value. Its involvement also embodies several intersections with neoliberalism in Taiwan, and yet eventually served to consolidate the bourgeoisie hegemony and failed to intervene in the course of neoliberalization. And here I will utilize like two populist movements in the 2000s, the red shirt movement and the white shirt movement, to elaborate on my point. So the red shirt movement in 2006 was the first mass movement mobilization resulting to the people in Taiwan's post-democratization era. And the incident itself was triggered by the corruption scandal of President Chen Shui-bian of the time during his secondary presidency, when his family was accused of soliciting bribe from financial enterprises in exchange of their irregular acquisition of public banks. And this scandal immediately instigated widespread anger and brought hundreds of thousands of people to the street, questioning the president's moral integrity and requesting him to step down. And since the participants all dressed in red, the movement was called, earned its name of as Red Shirt Movement. But President Chen Shui-bian's scandal actually went beyond his personal morality and has to be analyzed against the prolonged hegemonic struggles his regime was dealing with. To address the accumulation crisis, the Chen administration launched a series of neoliberal reform and measures, including promoting globalization, trade liberalization, neoliberal urbanism, and financial reform in the name of pursuing domestic banks' global competitiveness. It is against this backdrop that the scandal took place. But the red shirt movement ended up with individualizing Chen's moral flaws without really addressing any structural causes of neoliberalization of his age. And similarly, the white shirt movement in 2013 was triggered by another scandal about a young soldier's death from torture, where the government was accused of covering up the truth from the general public. And furious public collectively dressing white when they took to the street, requesting military reform, human rights, and just social justice. This populist movement soon evolved into a general distrust of the bureaucratic system and an appeal for better governance, government supervision, and direct citizen participation. So, sorry, this one. And the movement's appeal for like a political neutrality, rationality, and non-confrontational approach to social issues later materialized in the rise of so-called white power, which gave birth to a populist figure, Taipei City Mayor Ko Wen-je. Previously a famous physician, Ko Wen-je became popular for his like promotion of like good governance through transparency, efficiency, pragmatism, professionalism, but also elitism in treating like so-called urban decay, and especially the housing affordability crisis in Taipei. Enjoying popularity among young urban professional class, Ke further established the Taiwan People's Party, TPP, in 2019, and ran as the candidate for the 2024 presidential election. Its continuous political influence will be discussed in the conclusion section. So the legacies of hegemonic struggle also gave birth to the second form of populism, which I call neoliberal populism of the multitude. And this form of populist politics prevailed since 2008 and 10 as a direct result of the precipitated neoliberalization under the re-elected KMT regime in 2018. Sorry, how much time do I still have?
2.5.
Oh, 2.5? Okay. So, so as the KMT candidate, Ma Ying-jeou won the 2008 presidential election, it attempts to like reestablish hegemony through introducing a new political economic relationship with China. So in the political arena, President Ma Ying-jeou pursued rapprochement with Beijing. And in the economic arena, the Ma administration fervently pursued neoliberalism as the new mode of capitalist accumulation, including tax cut and liberalizing the cross-strait trade with China. As soon as Ma came to power, he signed up the cross-strait economic cooperation framework agreement known as ECFA with Beijing. So to sell the free trade agenda, the regime resorted to populism by invoking Taiwanese people as neoliberal and entrepreneurial subjects, seeking opportunities in the booming cross-strait market. So a strategy that I call neoliberal populism. Specifically, the government propaganda targeted SMEs and the lower middle classes, such as farmers. And these social groups used to be the victim of globalization, but are now invoked as active entrepreneurs in the cross-strait trade. And the swift path of the cross-strait trade pact in the parliament by the Ma regime in 2014 soon triggered the Sunflower Movement, where like thousands of protests occupied the parliament for nearly a month and eventually derailed the trade pact. The participants proved to be like highly heterogeneous in terms of their agenda. While some advocated for political reform, others asked the government to address the social and economic issues pertaining to trade liberalization. So what made this movement successful was that it embodies a converge between these two, like liberal populism and class-informed populism, under the framework of popular sovereignty, where the boundaries between the two began to blur, and their incompatible discrepancy temporarily suspended. But in the post-movement era, we see the overtaking of the liberal appeal for political reforms where the critical proposals addressing economic grievances for marginalized social groups were sidelined. Unfortunately, this development turned to a consolidated bourgeoisie hegemony, which saw the seeds for the counter-reform populist movement in the years to come. So soon after the Sunflower Movement, the Taiwanese society witnessed a rise of a populist figure, Han Kuo-yu. Han used to be an outlier of his own party, KMT, before elected for the mayor of Kaohsiung in 2018. And Han's campaign revolves around chanting the vitality of the grassroots economy. And the populist frenzy is instigated across the entire Taiwan. Later won him the nomination as the KMT's candidate for the 2020 presidential election. So as the Han identifies himself as a communist president, his supporters also believe that they were joining the communist uprising against the ruling elites and party establishment. So a closer look at Han's support base reveals heterogeneous social groups, including like retired civil servants who were disgruntled by the DPP regime's pension reform, farmers engaging in cross-strait trade, local business runners in like small cities, and local factions and religious groups involved in cross-strait relations. So in many ways, we see Han's proposal continues to embrace neoliberal populism invoked by the previous KMT regime. And it is clear that Han strategically mobilizes the unresolved social and economic issues in the post-Sunflower movement era. So for my concluding remarks, I'll be just very brief. So I think my research demonstrates the utility of the Gramscian approach in studying populism in Taiwan, which contextualizes heterogeneous forms of populist politics in a prolonged hegemonic restructuring course, the variegated neoliberalization processes, and the divergent ways in which different social groups are invoked and incorporated in this process. And this approach also help us identify the social forces contributing to the development of the bifurcated populisms in Taiwan, which proved to remain prevalent in today's politics. So in the 2024 election, we saw the return of Han Kuo-yu, now serving as the parliament speakers, which demonstrated the strong, this persistence of his strong support base. And also, we've seen a new wave of populism led by Ke Wen-je's party during the presidential election, where the identity of the quote-unquote little grass, Xiao Cao, was invoked to represent a mostly young, urban, educated, and spontaneous citizens as its major supporters. So targeting pending social issues such as housing, corruption, and social justice, this trend can also be seen as a mutation of the white power movement, white power, which also possibly shared the same shortcomings. Nevertheless, this populist force represented by the TPP party won 26% approval rates in the election, proving that its influence on Taiwan's politics is gonna be here to stay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, all right.
Oh, thank you. Right on time. Thank you for Professor Xu. Take the Gramscian approach into account for the kind of Taiwan's populism. It's quite a long history. Yeah, quite historical. But really broaden my kind of horizon. I never count the three social movement into as a categorical populism in the past, but maybe we can think from this angle. Those three social movement studied a lot in Taiwan. There's white shirt, red shirt, sunflower movement. We do have a lot of literature, but no one really linked that social movement to the so-called populism. Maybe it's a new angle. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, then we invite Professor, postdoctor Lin Junqi. Dr. Lin, please share your PPT with us and start your presentation. Also, please, 15 minutes. Junqi, hello.
Okay. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but not full yet.
Oh, okay.
Stuck.
Yeah. So now you can see my screen, right?
Yeah, what's wrong? Can you hear me? The screen
Yeah.
seemingly stuck. I cannot see what happened. 停止. What happened?
I can see Dr. Li Jinxi's screen.
I can see, but not full
Okay.
screen. And also, my screen is totally stuck. I cannot see you. I can see you, but it's static. It's not moving. I don't know why.
Let
Okay,
me try
fine.
again.
Okay, you give a full screen, please.
Is this okay?
Okay, just go ahead and don't wait for me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So thank you for having me here. So I'm glad I have this chance to join this panel and discuss populism in Asia, especially Taiwan and Japan, with excellent professors. So in my talk, I focus more on the practical way. So that means how political parties use populist rhetoric in the elections. So in this talk, I developed the idea. So I followed my idea of professionalization of populist communication, which is published in last year. So from that perspective, I'm going to talk about how mainstream parties use populist rhetoric. So in the latest Taiwan's elections. So you might know that on the January 13, we just had a new elections. So for both presidential and legislative elections. So according to the results, the official results, so Lai Qingde, the president candidate of DPP, won the presidential elections with around 40% of votes. Meanwhile, we have 16 parties that ran the legislative elections. But, well, unfortunately, there are only 3 parties enter the parliament. So, including the Democratic Progress Party, the Kuomintang, KMT, and the Taiwan People's Party, which is a newly emerged party in 2019. So, but when we look at how they communicate with their voters, we find that so more and more scholars try to argue that social media is an important communication channels for political parties to reach out the voters. So not only for a fringe party, but also for the mainstream party. So that means mainstream party. So that means mainstream party need to learn how to well manage their relationship, manage their relationship with the voters on the social media, and it gives that's and that's an interesting question, because I'm wondering if social media, if populist rhetoric is so useful on Facebook, for example, then how these mainstream parties use this kind of language to to establish their relationship between themselves and the voters. So I'm wondering whether populist communication strategies are also popular in mainstream parties' communication as well. So that's the starting point of the idea of professionalization of populist communication. So before I go into the 2024 case, So I will briefly talk about how I developed this professionalization of populist communication. So basically, I and Professor Danens and Professor Liao. So we try to adapt populist communication as a framework, as a communication framework. So especially there are different features of communication framework, including people-centrism, anti-elitism, restoring populist sovereignty, and exclusion. And then we reviewed the literature of professionalization, and most of them focus on the role of campaign experts. They all say that campaign experts are very important because they professionalize the party's campaign strategies. But we hold a different perspective. So we try to argue that campaign professionalization is also linked to the technological changes. So that means the technological innovation drives the campaign professionalization. So we're trying to say that if mainstream parties really want to establish good relationship with their voters, then on the social media, then they must learn how to professionalize their communication. So, for example, by using the populist rhetoric. So our results also indicates that mainstream parties per se are not populist, are less populist, but if we consider the interaction of different communication styles, then we find that negative style and emotional styles positively increase this kind of relationships. So that means mainstream parties are willing to use negative and emotional styles to reinforce their populist messages. So can we find similar trends in the 2024 national elections? So here I download facts with data of both DPP and KMT, but for a preliminary observation, I only look at their post for a month, so which is between December 1st and January 12th. So here I'm going to show you some examples, since this is not a very scientific analysis, but I'm trying to show you some interesting example. So about the DPP. So some of DPP's posts features people-centrism and emotionalism and emotional style. So for example, if you look at this slide, DPP tried to say that DPP stands for the whole Taiwanese people. So because in the past 8 years, the whole Taiwanese people cooperate with Tsai Ing-wen and try to improve the international roles of Taiwan. And so in this post, they also say, in this post, they are very people-centric because they try to identify the whole people as a group. So DPP so DPP are not trying to divide who is the people or who is not the people. They the party just says we thank for all the people, and also this post emphasize the some personal characteristics of the leaders like Tsai Ing-wen, and also they emphasize they emphasize that voting for the Lai Qingde and Xiang Meiqin are very important. So they are trying to encourage their supporters to vote for the DPP's candidate. And some of their posts are more negative and trying to focus more on the restoring, trying to focus on popular sovereignty. So, for example, this post shows that DPP tries to attack its major components, major opponents, KMT, especially KMT suffered from the corruption scandals. So in this post, DPP tried to emphasize that peace candidates are the enemies, and try to polarize the this elite and people as two different groups. Also, they try to also this poster describes the corruption as an crisis. So this is a very crucial crisis that that the DPP and the whole Taiwanese people need to solve in the future. And also some of them emphasize the leader's charisma. So, for example, the candidate of Vice President Xiao Meiqin. So the DPP emphasizes her positive images of being the Taiwan's ambassador in the US. And regarding the KMT, so some of KMT's posts are more people-centric and focus on the popular sovereignty and more sociable. So, for example, this is a ad on their website, on their Facebook profile, and in this post again, they try to emphasize that they really care about the people. Like their chairman, Eric Zhu, he went to everywhere and tried to hold the hands with every people he met, and try to say that really know your needs. And also, this post emphasize try to emphasize that their candidates, their legislature candidates are really professional and really know how to improve people's life in the future. But of course, their posts, some of their posts are also anti-elite. So especially they strongly criticize the policies of DPPs and try to ask for the voters to vote for the KMT, so that KMT have a chance to change everything or change politics in the next 4 years. So these are some preliminary conclusion of my observations. So basically, we can find that there are some major communicative features of mainstream parties' communication, including people-centrism, popular sovereignty, and anti-elitism. And also, mainstream parties' uses of populist communication are also associated with some communication style, as I mentioned earlier. But I think one interesting aspect is when they try to wrap up their populist messages with some kind of communication styles, then how voters react to their messages. And to be honest, the these questions I cannot answer here, but as I showed earlier, those posts received at least thousands of reactions from the voters. So I think it's also interesting to look at whether there are some positive or negative relations between them. Yeah. So my presentation stop here, and thank for your listening.
Thank you, Junqi. Would you please turn off your share? Thank you. I think we already 4 speakers already done their presentation. According to our agenda, we should start with the Q&A. Yeah, shall we have a question from our audience, from the internet audience? Yeah, please raise your hand. I have to say sorry first. My screen doesn't move. I don't know whether you can see me or not, but I see you as a stagger.
Yeah.
You can see me. Okay. At least my voice, my image is still here. My screen just totally stuck. I don't know why. I cannot see your expression on your face. Maybe I can see. Any questions? I don't know what's wrong.
Bulent has a question.
Okay, please. Brent.
Yeah, thank you very much for these engaging presentations, and I hope it will continue with the insightful discussions. My question is for all, whoever want to answer, sure he can. I wonder to what extent to threat perceptions regarding China and anti-China sentiments influence political dynamics in Taiwan and Japan. Can we discern the instrumentalization of anti-China fear in the populist agendas of political elites in both countries? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for blank questions. He asked for all of us. Yeah, shall we start from the Japan side? Hello, Professor Hino or Professor Yashida want to answer the questions. China's influence upon China's sentiment. Yeah.
But China. Well, I'm gonna relate my questions too, because a remark that I have for your introductory presentation, you mentioned Abe, Shinzo Abe, as a populist leader. And it is true that there is some media, some liberal media, or even among the intellectuals saying that Abe was, because he was assassinated after, he was a populist. But in my term, he's not really a populist, because one thing is that he's from the mainstream politicians stream. His grandfather was a prime minister, was an ancient prime minister. He's coming from a famous political family, and if we take as a criteria for being a populist, being an outsider in politics, he was not a populist. But from this, I'm taking the question from Brent, because he used this anti-sentiment towards China, and especially for the North Korea, which is an imminent crisis for Japan than China. He politically used, I think, this agenda of this feeling widespread among the Japanese, that feeling toward China and North Korea. And this is why he was so successful among the right-wing voters. In that term, we denote Abe not as populist, but a right-wing politician. And this concerned a lot with my presentation, because when you see the overall voters' political attitude in Japan, most of them, 80% of them, they say they are in the center. But when you see, you do some research towards a member of parliament, especially that of the LDP, they get very much.
Okay.
They
Hello?
get much Hello? Do you hear me?
I cannot hear.
Can you hear me?
Can you see me or hear me?
Dr.
Hello?
Yoshida, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, maybe
Hello?
you have some problem
Hello?
with your internet.
Hello?
Okay, I
Hello?
continue. I'm just
What?
saying that during the Abe period, the MPs of the LDP, they get much they move much towards the right side. So there is some discrepancy between the political elite and the overall voters. That will be my answer.
Okay, so Dr. Professor Liao has having technical issues. I'm
Oh,
unsure if
now can you hear me?
we can hear you perfectly fine.
I cannot hear you now. Hello? I cannot hear you.
We can still hear you. Right. Okay, so while we figure this out together,
Now can you hear me?
we can hear you fine, yes.
I cannot hear you. But I cannot hear it from now.
Wait, you can't hear
You
me?
please.
That's weird. I'm unsure if she can see the chat. Can you see the chat, Professor Liao? I don't think so.
Okay, but I cannot hear from you. Now, would you please say something from Professor Yoshida? Would you please say something?
Can you hear me?
Cannot.
Maybe you should get out from the Zoom once and re-enter after. That will be better.
Wow.
Maybe you can just once look out from Zoom.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left, and this won't be solved immediately.
Okay,
also figure that.
now can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Neo, we can tolerate time.
Okay.
Because there are some questions to ask and to be answered. Yeah, please continue.
Okay. Bullet asked in the chat a question to Professor Hino. Can you see the question? Professor Hino is in the chat.
Right. I'm just gonna follow up some of the discussion that have been already held. On China, it is easier for politicians to build on that and then to dichotomize issues. So that's one possibility. But I do agree that the recent politicians like Abe is not a prototype of let's say populist politicians. They're really coming from the inside of the power, but they use that rhetoric sometimes wisely to target other elite. Not, they are the elite of the elite. So they try to arouse the public sentiment by, for example, targeting some of the liberal media, some of the people with the expertise. So they are considered to be elite. And if they attack the other kind of non-political elite, then that can also work. So it's a very, different type of, I don't know if I should say populism, but if it comes to anti-elitist sentiment, it does appear in the rhetoric of recent politicians like Abe and even Suga as well. It is also true that the authoritarian values, as we measure in some of the long-term established measurement, LDP does capitalize on those values. So that's really the strength of LDP, and it's really the stronghold. And socioeconomic values remain to be important, but this liberal or libertarian authoritarian kind of value divide has been, it's not a recent thing, but it has been active even since the 80s. So this libertarian and authoritarian terminologies has been already discussed in the 80s, in the earlier time of the voting behavior. So it's not that it has started to happen, but it has been out there for a long time, and it hasn't been undermined even now. So that's two types of values that need to be taken into our consideration in thinking about how the votes come from. So I should stop now here.
Dr.
Yeah,
Shu,
okay.
you have your hand up?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
We can see and hear you, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for Professor Hino's answer. Still the kind of question bullet, right? You want to ask China's sentiments influence upon Taiwan's populism. Yeah, it's okay. I briefly answer your question. Yes, we do in Taiwan. We do have so-called anti-China sentiment. That kind of sentiment quite influenced our 2020 election. Very strong one. But for this year election, 2024, not so strong because people try to balance something between, but still there. It's still very important factors in Taiwan election. Yeah, that's a brief answer. So-called, even in 2020, the kind of anti-China sentiment, to a certain extent, my interpretation kind of helped Tsai Ing-wen kind of a populism emerge. Yeah, try to support, use simple language. You are China's friend, or if you are so friendly to China, you are our enemy, like that kind of simple dichotomy. Yeah, really used during the presidential election in 2020. But not this year. Yeah, getting better. Yeah, my brief answer. Yeah. Then who else? Yeah, please, Professor Xu. Yeah, please.
Hi, thank you. My question is for both Professor Yoshida and Hino. I know Hino. So yeah, thank you very much for helping me understanding more in depth about populism in Japan. But my question is that so maybe less so in Taiwan, but a lot more frequently in South Korea. What we see is that whenever a politician feels like, oh, he or she enjoys popular support, but it was not recognized by the establishment, they tend to break with their, the establishment by setting up their own party. But it seems that it's not the case in Japan, where these politicians would pit themselves against the establishment within the party, its own party politics. So my question is, like, what prevents these populist politicians from taking an oppositional stance, for example, establishing their own party in formal politics in Japan? Thank you.
Okay. Now we will invite either Professor Yoshida or Professor Hino would like to answer Professor Xu's question. Very interesting one. Yeah. Both of you want to say something? Yeah, please.
The most simple answer to that difficult question is that one, LDP is so strong that even they establish their own party, where they can have 2, 3, 4 seats, which is we have experienced, we have seen already. It happens sometimes, but one thing is that LDP is very much strong. And secondly, relating to that, in Japan, most of the seats in the lower parliament is a single member district. So that if there is one or two party already established in this kind of electoral system, it's very hard to have a new party entering into that conflict. That will be the simplest answer that I can imagine.
Okay, thank you. How about Professor Hino? Do you want to say something regarding this question?
Right. As Professor Yoshida mentioned, electoral systems definitely matter. It's not that there's no such parties of, regardless if we can call it populist parties, but there are small parties that are appearing almost every single election, but that turn out to be the upper house election when the proportional representation is held at national level. So if you have vote share more than 2%, then you can gain seat. But most often, if you want to really gain power, then you need to, one other strategy is to be a part of LDP or governing coalition or those, already established parties, then to play a card of anti-establishment or anti-central government sort of approach, that when it comes to when the power hold or the established prime ministers and also those factions that are supporting the prime ministers appear to fail, then they can have a chance to gain power. So being a part of establishment first, but then to be able to play that oppositional role, that's another strategy that has been taken by many politicians if they really want to make some change. But it is really difficult to make a full-fledged change from the very grassroots at the ground level because of these institutional elements that have been already discussed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we are almost close to the 12 o'clock. We're supposed to stop there, right? So do you have anything want to say? How about Junqi? Do you want to say something regarding Taiwan's populism, especially related to mainland China?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so thanks for Professor Liao's question. So basically, I agreed with you, and it reminds me that in our analysis, we also proved that China factor actually influenced Taiwan's populism in the 2020 election. So when I analyzed the data, I found that Taiwan State Building Party is the most populist one, and this party's content almost of its content focus on anti-China content or sentiments. So I think but for these elections, as Professor Liao said, it seems that China factor might play less important roles here, but I think we still can analyze these arguments later. Yeah, so this just for some additional information. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, Professor Xu, you want to say something? Okay, please be short.
Okay, I would like to briefly respond to Andrea's question in the chat column about the differences between the West and the East. I think my brief answer is that it is because like in Japan and Taiwan, this kind of political reform that happens concomitantly with like economic liberalization. And this is not the case for most of the Western societies right now. But if we look back in Western history, when Thatcherism was taking uphand, she also utilizes populist forces to achieve her populist neoliberal agenda. So I think in this regard, there might be some similarities. It's just like a different timelines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Professor Xu's further remarks. Okay, shall we I make a short conclusion? We shall finish this panel. First, certainly thank you for your all's presentation. I really learned a lot. And secondly, I want to say in kind of response to the topic, we are assigned to talk about the kind of various facet of populist, authoritarian, and nationalist trend in Japan and Taiwan. My personal understanding, if I'm wrong, you can correct me later. Not right now, we don't have enough time. I don't think we have a very complicated populism in Japan and Taiwan. Maybe we just have a kind of minimum, maybe I label as a kind of communication style. Basically, it's a strategy, campaign strategy. Japan doesn't matter who he is a governor level or kind of a prime minister, they use during campaign period. They certainly connect with certain issues or reform, political reform, but mainly used for attracting votes. In Taiwan, actually the same. They want votes, they want win. They see the kind of election winning is so important. So its communication style more than kind of a deep or very thoughtful ideology. We may label as very thin ideology. As for the reasons for causing this kind of a communication style or communication populism, I think like Professor Xu said, maybe neoliberalism, this kind of economic strategy is a cause, because we try to utilize neoliberalism, market driven, and try still follow a capitalist line, make the society still have the poor and rich, and the gap between the two sides also getting wider. And some loser will say something and try to against this. There's a whole lot of theory about that. It's a cause, and also interestingly, also a consequence for both countries, for both Taiwan and Japan. After this kind of a social movement, campaign, still adopt a neoliberalism strategy to solve the economic problems. That's a kind of interesting phenomenon in Taiwan. We just don't have leftists. In Japan, you have Communist Party, but not strong at all. Also, right now, we are strongly against China. So we have a minimum definition for populism in these two countries, both Japan and Taiwan, is kind of only communication sake for campaign sake. And the reason and the cause, similar neoliberalism. And other things, we have some institutional design and also cultural difference. Maybe we don't have a strong meritocracy heritage, as I said before, but you have a single member district for legislature. We do have single member district, but Japan doesn't have a president to be directly elected. We do have that kind of a confrontation, single member district. We just elect one president, make our society will embrace so-called populism more strongly during the campaign period for the presidential position. I think that's kind of a difference. So our populist degree, I think is heavier than Japan, but we are both of two countries belong to the category, as Hino said, is not a full-fledged populism, only minimal. That's what I observed. I learned from you all. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to attend this interesting discussion panels. Thank you, Blaine, and thank you, Neil. You're sitting with us. You help us running the kind of a panel. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Liao. Before you all leave, I have announcements. First of all, massive thanks on behalf of the ECPS to our panelists and attendees for both your insight and your questions. It made the conversation really nice. Thank you, Professor Liao, for your great moderation. We really appreciate your efforts. Please, everyone, mark your calendars for the 7th of March, I believe, for our next panel, which is on the old and new faces of populism in Latin America. We would appreciate if you all made time to see us again next week. Please keep in mind we have this recording up on our YouTube channel, and we'll soon publish a panel report on our website, again, which are really helpful for scholars and interested parties on looking at populism globally.
Okay, one more remark. For both our countries, we do not see so-called very strong nationalist trend and authoritarian trend either. The last remarks, you can read from all the 4 presenters' papers. Thank you.
Thank you. So as far as I'm aware, that's everything from us at the ACPS. You're all great. You're all really talented people. I appreciate your time and your energies. We will see you in the future. Please come see us again next week, Thursday, 7th of March, 10 a.m. for all new faces of populism in Latin America. Thank you so much. Have a good week. Have an amazing March and everything. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. 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 Thank you.